Well,
I've never seen something like this before.
well, you won't ever again either. Because when he and I built this dining set together, and you can see that dining set when that sold for $600,000 to raise money for the Carter Center, I told him, I said, I want to commemorate that. And so that's when uh, I told him, I said, I want to make a bronze sculpture of your hands, because as we made that, you can see that he was sitting on my shaving horse, which is right there. That's the shaving horse. And so he's sitting on it using the draw knife. And so I made bronze castings of his hands and mounted them on a real draw knife. And then this went up for auction the next year, one just like this, and it sold for 140,000. And I told him, I said, I'm going to make two more. I said, I'm going to make castings of my hands, and I'm going to keep my left hand with my wedding band, and you'll have your left hand. So I have his right hand on mine, and he has my right hand on his bronze sculpture.
Oh, wow.
And I titled it Teamwork, because it was teamwork to make that dining set. And so, it just raised huge amounts of money.
Yeah.
And so it was just wonderful doing stuff with him, because we just had fun.
Yeah?
And he was so down to earth, he and Rosalind. And yeah, I get all emotional.
Oh, well, that's
Just
sweet.
thinking about the times we had, it was special. The, and of course, the Carter Center logo, and then on the back of the dining chairs, I laser engraved their names and their motto of waging peace and fighting disease and building hope. And then since he and I made it together, well, then I put both of our signatures there.
How
And
old was he when you two made these?
he would have been 90, 91.
No kidding.
Yeah, yeah. And of course, he was 80 or 81 when I first met him and got involved with him and started doing things with him. Uh, and yeah, and so it's been 20 years. And that started because I wrote a book about making these chairs, and I knew he was a prolific woodworker and chair maker. And so I had three other uh, chair makers that I knew would write a page in my book about how they made them. But I thought it would be really cool if I could get President Carter to write a page in my book about how he made chairs. And of course, when I told my wife that, she said, "Oh yeah, just go call up a president." And it must have been kind of like a needle poking me, because I said, you know what, I'm going to do it. And so I called the Carter Center, and they said, well, you don't just call him up and talk to him. If you want to write us a letter and tell us what you want to talk to him about, if he wants to, he will. So I said, yeah, I can do that. And of course, I was teaching chair making at Palomar College, and I taught there for 22 years after I retired from the Navy. And so I had pictures of my students were clamoring for me to write this book. They said, we cannot remember all that you're telling us. And so I agreed to do that, and just in 2004 started writing that book. And so when I called, well, I sent the letter to the Carter Center with pictures of what I was doing, and 3 weeks later I got a phone call back.
No.
And they said, yep, on this date, at this time, you'll have 30 minutes to talk with him. And I didn't know at that time that 30 minutes was unheard of. 15, 20 at the most for ambassadors. So I called, and he said, "Hello, this is Jimmy Carter," and his Georgia drawling. And I said, "Well, this is Russ Philbeck in San Diego." And he said, "I've been so anxious to talk to you." And because everybody wanted to talk politics. Nobody wanted to talk about chair making, which was something he really enjoyed. And so he said, "Well, how you doing?" And I said, "Well, I'm kind of nervous." And he said, "Well, you wouldn't be nervous if we were in the wood shop, would you?" I said, "No." And so from that moment on, we had just the most awesome visit, and him telling me how he made chairs, the tools that he uses, and how he would cut a tree down close enough to his house, and he'd cut the logs in short enough lengths so that Rosalind could help him drag them into the yard so he could start splitting them into parts. It was like, you're kidding me. You're President of the United States cutting down trees and First Lady. It's true. And she helped weave the seats with the hickory bark and stuff for him. And so it's such a wonderful relationship. So he wrote a page in my book. He wrote the foreword for my book. And I have pictures you can take. This is the foreword that he wrote. And then in the back of the book, this is the page that this was our conversation that day on the phone. And so that's those 4 chairs that you see in that picture are the chairs that he made in 1982 after he left the White House. And he had to raise money to build the Carter Center and the Presidential Library and Museum. All presidents have to do that. They have to raise their own money. Those chairs were part of his seed money. He sold them through Sotheby's auction house and probably made about $40,000 to $50,000 back then.
Yeah.
And but we just became such good friends, because during our conversation of how he makes chairs, I asked him if he would like to have one of my spoke shaves. And a spoke shave is this tool, which I use to shape the rungs and legs for chairs. And he said yes, he would love to have one of them. And at the end of the conversation, I said, "How would you like to have one of my rocking chairs?" And he said yes. And so this would have been in July of '04. And I said, "Well, it takes me a while to build them. I will start on it, and I'll deliver it to you in June of '05, because I would always go to Kentucky to harvest trees and hickory bark for my students to make chairs here at Palomar." And so that's what I did. And so while I was building his chair right here, my wife Carol came out in the shop and said, "You know, you're building this beautiful chair for him." Said, "You better not overlook his wife."